Hi there. I want to talk briefly about training in professional service firms and specifically consultancies. I'm often asked to do training, especially at senior level, in terms of business development, visible expertise, trusted advisor, things like that, in terms of getting that pipeline going and allowing seniors to step up. So I want to talk about some common mistakes that consultancies make when dealing with training. And very often you don't start thinking about formal training until you're of a certain size. So number one, I would say it is the focus on training rather than everything else. So there's this famous approach which is 10-20-70, which is 10% training, 20% mentoring and social interaction, and then 70% on the job practice. Now I would break on the job practice down into safe practice and difficult practice. So safe is when you've got a mentor or your line manager with you and it's an easy environment to do the work, and then you might have a more difficult client where you're practicing and really developing your skills. So that's the first thing, and those three things have got to be, or those four things if you take my approach, have got to be really well aligned. So there's no point having training and then your line manager tells you to do something different, and then your mentor suggests you do something different, and then when you get into practice you can't do all the work, or you have to do it a different way because the software won't allow you. The good way of overcoming that is to ensure that everyone in the firm knows what that training is, or preferably has even been through that training themselves. And it might seem a little bit crazy to put seniors through the training for the juniors, but they're going to need that consistency, and also the seniors might notice inconsistencies or problems or opportunities for improvement in the training. So I would recommend putting everyone through the training, no matter what the level, certainly top down. The second thing I see a lot of challenges with is tying it to the competence model. So very often I'm approached by a firm and they'll say, "Oh, we need more sales. So can you do some training on business development or becoming more visible, or being a trusted advisor?" And that's fine. And I do try and tie in a mentoring aspect to that training, but if a skill is important, it needs to be thought about throughout the organisation. So your entire competence map, and if you don't have one and you're 20 plus, you should be thinking about getting one, partly for lots of strategic reasons, but partly because it's going to enable what I'm talking about now. If a consulting firm is typically split into grinders, minders and finders. So the grinders grind out the work, the minders make sure the work is being done, and the finders go out and find the work. If you promote people who are great grinders but they don't have any experience or training or mentoring in management, then when they get to the management thing it's going to be a bit of a shock to them. And you've promoted them because they're great grinders, but they might not make great minders. Now this happens even more so when you go from minders to finders. Those business development skills, and you'll already know this, those business development skills that you really want amongst the seniors very often aren't there because you haven't paid them any attention. So getting a consistent view of what your competencies are throughout the organisation, how that ties into your strategy and what type of firm you are, is going to be crucial to getting the right people, getting those skills embedded early. So it doesn't mean that you need to train people in business development at a junior stage, but they do need to know that business development is important. They need to have visibility of what great looks like or good looks like in the organisation, and they do need to know that in order to get to the next level they need to demonstrate some types of behaviours when it comes to finding work. The third and final thing, I could talk about this forever, but the third and final thing I'd say is, let's say two things. The third thing I'm going to say is around tying it to your business strategy. So all consultancy, not all, a lot of consultancy firms are different. So if you typically think about brains firms, innovation firms and process firms, most firms are a mix of those, but typically I see more process firms. They tend to have a fairly high leverage ratio. In other words, their organisation is that shaped. Strategy, innovation, brains firms tend to be more that shape. And so tying and low leverage firms tend to focus more on mentoring and social interaction to produce the type of people they want, sort of on-the-job training. Process firms tend to focus more on IP and formal classroom training. It's not always the case, but that's a good generalisation. So matching your training programme to your leverage ratio, what type of firm you are, and what strategy you're pursuing in terms of the skills you need, is really important. The final thing, and this is something that is really often missed, is from an investor's or buyer's perspective, I want to see, so your internal training program is an asset, or your training program, no matter what you use, is an asset, but it can only be shown to be an asset if it's tied to key business outcomes. So when you're implementing your training, or when you're thinking about the management framework around your training programs and your competence management and mentoring and all the rest of it, you need to be thinking about your key business outcomes and how your training and development work tracks to that. So key figures: number one, leverage. How many juniors are you using versus seniors? It's obviously good to use more juniors because it increases project margin and reduces calls on seniors who could otherwise be selling. Number two, efficiency. How efficient is your organisation? Number three, utilisation. Are you getting high utilisation of juniors? Therefore, they're very billable. Therefore, they're bringing in more money, and you make more margin on juniors than you do on seniors. And finally, time to billability. Or billability. Sorry. So if you are bringing someone new into the organisation, how long does it take them to get fully billable? Now, those four metrics are really crucial because they impact your margin, your EBITDA and your gross margin really directly. So ideally, what I would love to see as an investor or a buyer of a firm is that you've got really good utilisation, leverage ratios, gross margin, time to billability. And the reason for that is your IP, your training, your mentoring, and your culture. And if you can get that package working from an investor's perspective, number one, it will have an impact on those key metrics, but number two, I'm seeing value in it. So therefore your training program becomes another asset that you're offering a potential buyer or investor, and they might run some of their own people through it, or even you could offer it as an external service. So it's something that's great IP. Quite a long video there, a lot to talk about. Hope it was useful. Bye bye.